Hello, friends, and welcome to today's episode. John, a forest guard, thinks he's better off by himself. He doesn't want other people in his life because he thinks love will only hurt him. One day, he meets a baby in a shocking way that makes him change his mind. John sat still in the brush between the tall trees and watched the sunset. The sky turned gray, and the trees on the other side of the opening cast shadows. The biggest wolf stuck its nose up. John was sure it could smell him close by. Even though his heart was beating fast, he took slow, deep breaths. The dark wolf moved slowly toward the deer lake he had left near some ferns. Soon, her babies joined her, and the whole family ate the meat. John was happy. He watched them eat, then took a twisting path through the bush back to his house. Just inside the door to his cell, he kicked off his shoes and lit a lamp. While his food was cooking over the fire, he wrote down what he had seen and learned about the wolves. The fire popped and crackled, and bugs sang in the night, but there were no other sounds in the house. The only people John knew in the forest were the wolves. John only saw other people when he went to the nearest town once a month to get supplies. John liked how lonely it was to be the only guard in the area. As few people as possible should be in his life. The next day, John was checking out one of the tracks when he saw some crows fighting over a dead animal. John moved closer because he was curious. When he saw the gray and white hair, his heart dropped. John's voice was scratchy and louder than he thought it would be, which surprised him and the crows. He got down on his knees next to the dead wolf pup. His eyes filled with tears. Someone had shot the little guy. What kind of beast would do that? He gently ran his fingers over the puppy's fur and said a quiet prayer. Wasn't good enough. John knew he should leave the puppy alone and let the crows do their job, but it didn't feel right. John instead collected rocks and made a mound for the puppy. He got some flowers and put them on top of the pile of rocks. As he stood up, he saw something move in the corner of his eye. It was Jody, one of the two mothers in the small pack of wolves in the area. She looked at him with her bright eyes and dangling tongue. John looked down and didn't look her in the eyes. "I'm sorry, Mama," he told her. "I let you down when I didn't protect your baby, but it won't happen again." John told his boss about what happened. While she was waiting to hear from him, something else happened that made her feel bad. A few days after John found the dead puppy, a baby's cries woke him up. John ran to his front door. Even though it was still dark, he could see Jody coming toward his hut because of the light from his lamp. The wolf was by herself and was holding something in her mouth. She looked at John as she put the package at the bottom of the steps that led to his door. A tiny arm stuck out. As John ran to check out the box, the wolf loped back into the trees. He hadn't made it up. Jody really had given him a baby. He pulled back the sheets and was glad to see that the baby was okay. Again, it cried. "Take it easy." John put the child's blankets back on and bounced the child in his arms. When this urge kicked in, it reminded him of a pain he'd tried to forget for a long time. John didn't want to think about the past, so he turned his attention to the mystery of the present. Where did Jody find this baby? How did she know that he needed the child? John shouted for the parents of the child, but no one replied. He wasn't shocked, because wolves could cover a lot of ground in one night, and Jody could have found the kid anywhere within that range. He called the police, and then he and the baby were on their own. John said, "Well, I guess you need some TLC." He dug around in the back of his closet until he found a package that was tightly wrapped. It hurt his heart to look at what was inside, but he thought the baby's need was more important than his wish to forget the past. He took a pack of cloth diapers out of the bag. John took the baby out of its swaddle and saw that it was drenched. "I'm sure you'll find a way to use them soon, though." Once the little boy was clean and dry, John mixed some formula from the stocks of his late son and fed the boy. Once the child's needs were met, he started to talk to John. "I'm sure it was quite the adventure, little man," John said. "You should feel very lucky that Jody is so smart and knows how to be a good mother." The baby fell asleep quickly. As John held the baby close to his chest, the warmth of the baby's body and the soft sound of his breathing reminded John how much he missed being with friends and family. "Ain't much to do about it," he mumbled as he rubbed the baby's back. "Just like you, my sister Rosie got lost in the woods, but we never found her again. After a year, Mom and Pop both died of broken hearts. I had to live with my uncle, who was not a very nice guy. John groaned. Even though the baby didn't understand a word he said, it helped him to finally let out his pain. I nearly had a son, he said. Not long after I moved back to Pa's home, I married a beautiful woman. We were very happy until our baby died shortly after birth. After that, maybe we could have been happy again, but I couldn't take any more loss. The baby changed places. John put out his hand to protect the boy, and the boy put his hand around John's finger. Even though he was crying, the man smiled at the baby. Now that you're here, I wonder if I shouldn't give the world a second chance. John wondered if he would ever be happy, but he didn't know anyone, so how could he start a family? In the afternoon, the baby was picked up by a service for children. John saw the boy's cute face and couldn't bear to give him up. He wished with all his heart that he could keep the baby, but he couldn't. After that, John was surprised by how empty his cell seemed without the baby's gurgles and giggles. Now, all he could hope for was that the child would be back with his family soon. For the next few weeks, John kept himself from worrying about the lost baby by looking for signs of the people who killed the wolf pup. But the area had just had a lot of rain, which wiped out any tracks. John got a phone call one day that helped him stop worrying about something. The mother of the baby called him to thank him for taking care of her child. The woman asked, "Please, won't you join me and my family for dinner?" John wasn't sure, but he said he would meet the family for dinner. He had just chosen to give the world another chance, after all. When John went to the family's house, a bubbly woman with a big smile met him at the door. "I think you are John. Come in. My name is Rosie, and my husband Mike is in the next room with Timothy, whom you've already met." "My sister's name was Rosie," he said as he walked in. "Had?" Rosie's eyebrows went up. "I don't want to talk about it." John took his eyes off the door just as a man walked up to it. John was a little stressed because he had just met two people in a short amount of time when he hadn't talked to anyone in years. But as they ate dinner together, he started to feel more at ease. After that, Rosie brought him her baby, Timothy. He smiled at the boy he was holding. "I've got a question," said John. "How did you and Timothy end up being apart?" Rosie and Mike gave each other a look. "I wanted to show my husband the beautiful place where I grew up, but a deer ran across the road and made me lose control of the car. We hit a tree, and we both passed out. When we woke up, there was an ambulance there, but Timothy was gone. Did Child Services tell you that one of the wolves brought him to me?" "No." Rosie sat up straight in her chair. "Are you kidding?" John gave a nod. "She is called Jody." "Rosie, you said that you grew up near a bush. Where did you come from?" Rosie was happy. "None. My dad built a house in the woods where I lived when I was young. It was beautiful, but one day I got lost. They moved me from shelter to shelter while they looked for my parents, but by the time they found them, they were both dead. At that time, I was sent to live with a foster family," Rosie said. John looked at the locket that Rosie took out from under her shirt and showed him. It was the last puzzle piece. "You're my sister," John said. "Even if our stories were different, I know that ring. Follow your heart home is written on the inside." Rosie's mouth fell open. "But I never said I had a brother, so how is that you, John?" John gave a nod. "When you didn't show up, we thought the worst. I never even thought that maybe you were still alive." They gave each other a hug. The rest of the evening was spent getting up on everything that had happened in the last 30 years that they had missed. It was sad to see each other again. He couldn't believe that the sweet baby Jody gave him was actually his cousin when he looked down at Timothy sleeping in his arms. John found it hard to leave, especially when he gave Timothy to Mike and the kid began to cry. It seemed like the baby also didn't want him to leave. John drove home on the rutted path that wound through the forest. His heart felt lighter than it had since he was a kid. But when he heard gunshots through the trees, all of those good feelings went away. John got his gun, radio, and flashlight and went into the bush. He called for help and ran toward where the shots were coming from. Soon, he ran into 3 armed men who were on their way to Jody's den. John stayed back to let the men know where he was, and then he used his flashlight to follow the men's tracks through the woods. When John saw that they were there illegally to hunt wolves, he jumped out and arrested them. When Rosie came to visit the next day, John told her about how Timothy's hero almost got killed by shooters. Then she suggested that they start a group to help protect wolves. "It's the least I can do," said Rosie. She had tears in her eyes as she looked at John's home. John held his sister in his arms. For a while, they stood together in silence, surrounded by tall pine trees. John watched a bird fly through the light coming through the tree branches and took a deep breath of the smell of the forest. Now that he had found his family, John only had to do one more thing. With Rosie's help, John worked up the courage to call his ex-wife Melanie over the next few weeks. He told her everything about how he met Timothy and how their late son's things had helped the baby. They both cried on the phone, and then they made plans to get together. Melanie wanted to meet Timothy because she wanted to learn more about him. That was the start of John and Melanie getting back together. They got married again within a year, and Melanie got pregnant not long after. Soon, John was the happy father of a baby boy. He named him Conry, which meant Wolf King and was a nod to his Irish roots as well as the wolves. That's it for today, friends. Please let us know what you think about this story. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon for more amazing stories.